The multi-million-dollar Foreshore development is Newcastle's most significant bicentennial project, and Foreshore Committee Chairman and Deputy Lord Mayor Alderman Dennis Nichols says it shouldn't be knocked. He admits while the site is under construction, it's not very pretty. However, he says criticism levelled at the project, in particular the Queen's Wharf Tower and walkway, is premature.
The criticism has been that it's an ugly structure. And of course, I think people haven't realised that at present this is still a construction site, and there will be quite a significant difference between the state that it's in now and when it's finished.
Some criticism has come from members of the Newcastle City Council. Alderman Saunders has suggested murals be painted on the walkway's concrete supports. Alderman Nichols has moved an amendment to refer the suggestion for consideration, but says murals don't fit the design concept of the original plan and advice must be sought. He says a planned beautification project involves establishing planter boxes and shrubs at the base of walkway support columns and paving Market Street. Concern has also been expressed about the appearance of the Foreshore Tower.
The tower in its present form is not the finished project. There will be small railings placed around it so that the end result will be much different to what you see in place now.
Will it remain the same colour?
No, they'll be a creamy colour. The bars that go around it, they'll be spaced with a very small distance between them, so that'll make it quite safe as well.
The project is expected to be complete by January the 14th.
State Opposition Leader Nick Greiner was in Newcastle to address a monthly meeting of the Newcastle Real Estate Institute. He used the occasion to slam Landcom, saying 3 Landcom estates in Newcastle were selling blocks at grossly inflated prices. According to Mr Greiner, this was outrageous because Landcom had been established to provide the most affordable land possible.
The documents we received today, which are confidential internal Landcom memoranda and pricing documents, indicate quite clearly that on 3 subdivisions in the Gateshead area mostly, in 1985 and 1986, Landcom was making profits on average of $11,000 a block on an average selling price of about $28,000. In other words, they were making about a 35% profit, which is obviously a huge amount. They were selling at the full market price. In other words, they weren't passing on the advantages that Landcom has in terms of costs and local government charges. They weren't passing those on. They're simply acting as a private developer, selling at what the market will bear.
On the issue of the forthcoming state election, Mr Greiner is confident the Liberal Party will poll strongly in the Port Stephens electorate.
As far as the Hunter goes, we think we've got an excellent chance with Bob Scott in Port Stephens. We see that as a seat that we've got a really good chance of winning. A lot of other seats in the area, there is clearly a swing away from Labor. Even the local government elections, Lake Macquarie indicated a dramatic move against Labor, so we'll be running very hard.
The state-concerned low-income homeowners group represents residents statewide, including those from 26 Hunter Valley suburbs. The planned legal action follows changes to the government's affordable home loan scheme. Homeowners Group Chairman John Lawton says interest rates increased by an average 6% to 13.5% overnight on October the 1st. He says people were led to believe interest rates would rise by 0.5% per year for 10 years and increase by 1% thereafter until rates reached within 1% of the Commonwealth lending rate. During a meeting with the group's steering committee in Sydney yesterday, Mr Lawton says Housing Minister Frank Walker admitted people had been misled and false information had been given. However, he says blame has been shifted to the government's housing cooperative societies, and Mr Walker told the group, regardless of borrowers' circumstances, the new system is here to stay.
He's completely flat that he will not change the system and that the people, no matter what circumstances, will be staying at this system.
So what are your next steps now?
We're going to be taking legal action within the next few days.
And what are you actually aiming to get from that?
We want the system reverted back to what people originally were misled to sign up for.
The group will hold a meeting to report on Mr Walker's discussions at the Maitland Town Hall on Monday night at 7 o'clock. Mr Lawton says the new interest rates are having a drastic effect.
People have planned their lives well ahead on the system that they did sign up for. A lot of people have got 2 mortgages and that they just cannot afford this increase in interest rate.
What will happen if that legal action isn't successful and the interest rates don't come down?
We have no doubt about the legal action that it will be successful.
The Shire's Emergency Services headquarters is located opposite the council chambers at Raymond Terrace. Inside, a clerical assistant, recently appointed under a youth employment scheme, has nearly ended her 6-month term, and that's where the problem begins. For the 400 volunteers throughout the Shire, the 14 local bushfire stations are kept well manned, particularly in the summer season. Last year, Council voted to make the temporary clerical assistant position a permanent one, but at this week's meeting, a rescission motion was put forward by Councillor Mackenzie to make the position obsolete. And that's what's got the bushfires alarmed, who are predicting one of the worst fire seasons ahead.
Why we have turned around and are kicking up over this is because she mans our radios when the head FCO is not about, or he's called out to an emergency fire or whatever, accident or whatever it may be. The same with the assistant FCO that we've got in there too. If he's called out, we've got no one to man the office.
The Shire's bushfire volunteers will meet before the Council's next sitting, scheduled in 2 weeks, to prepare their submission appealing to Council to save the position. And so the future of a job, which the volunteer bushfires say is essential to their operations, will be decided at Council's next meeting. In the meantime, applications for the position, called by the former Council, have been put on hold until the matter is resolved.
Speers Point Park was a hive of activity yesterday as the birthday festivities got underway. The park was established as a lakeside leisure spot in 1887 and now, 100 years on, is one of the most popular destinations on the lake. Yesterday, hordes of well-wishers turned out for the occasion, including the Newcastle Cycleways movement, which was also celebrating a birthday. For the past 10 years, the group has pedalled across most of the district. Following the cycle route from Newcastle to Wallsend and then to Bullaroo, the convoy arrived at the park to join in the birthday party. This week is also Bicycle Week across the state, and in this region there's a packed program for the pedalling enthusiast. The highlight will be an 80-kilometre trek from Dungog to Newcastle next Sunday.
A local pop group released its debut single today at an unusual place for such an occasion. And just to make sure everyone got Vegemite Reggae's message, Send It Out was given the stamp of approval at the Newcastle Post Office.
Send it out on the plane for boats.
Vegemite Reggae has been a popular attraction on the local music scene for the past 3 years. The 7 members of the band have gathered such a devoted following that only last week they were presented with the Star Music Award. Send It Out is their first single recorded and produced locally, and what better place to launch it than the Newcastle Post Office.
Well, I think it's taken us 3 years just to get all the material and the band ready to go. I think also to get the band's performance up to scratch. You know, with the performances in Sydney, that's helped the band become a really tight outfit now. Sort of get used to playing to people, all that kind of stuff.
And the release of the single is just a debut to the album coming up.
The release of the single, yeah, we've probably got like 3 albums worth of songs ready to go, but we've done an album and that will be released at the same time, or just after the single is released down in Sydney.
If the album goes well for the band, it's just a matter of time before they send it out to the rest of Australia.
We're looking at trying to organise a national tour on the strength of you know, like each city becoming more interested in our single. And that's what we like to do, a nice big national tour.
The man who did it. 1987 really has been Peter Dewan's year. In January, he was ranked 301, but shot to 43 after knocking Boris Becker out of this year's Wimbledon. In the 4 months since then, he has slipped back to 56, but is still reaping the rewards from his giant-killing Wimbledon triumph.
That's helped me a lot with endorsements and things like that. And, you know, I'm going to get a good amount of mileage out of that for a few more months to come, and hopefully I can come up with another big win here before too long that's going to help me again.
Peter's main ambition is to play singles for the Australian Davis Cup team, a spot he was expecting when Pat Cash pulled out of the tie against India.
I was a little bit disappointed not to play singles for Australia in the Davis Cup, and I was a little bit frustrated you know, when I didn't get picked to play in singles, and yeah, I'm still trying to come to terms with that decision a little bit too.
You're not thinking of giving away representing Australia in Davis Cup?
Oh no, representing Australia is the you know, the best thing in tennis. There's nothing compares to it, and it's always been a goal and ambition for me to play Davis Cup for Australia. And I know we've got it tough next year playing Mexico in Mexico first up. So hopefully the boys will all, you know, if we all pull together as a team, we can hopefully get through that first round.
The annual Perrier Grand Prix was almost never run this year. Last night's heavy rain and today's overcast conditions threatened its cancellation for much of the day. As it was, the ominous weather kept punters at home, and the turnout for one of the Newcastle Jockey Club's most prestigious races was much smaller than usual. By this afternoon, however, race officials decided it was dry enough and the 10 starters were put on the track, much to the relief of sales manager for Shelley's Soft Drinks, Stephen Muter. Shelley's has been sponsoring the race for the last 7 years. Well, soft drinks and horses seems an odd mix.
Yeah, I guess so for soft drink, but Perrier is certainly the prestigious mineral water, and certainly in this country and perhaps the world. And horse racing being supposedly the sport of kings, it's certainly appropriate that we be associated with horse racing.
And the better the race, the better the publicity.
Oh, undoubtedly.
The rain held off and the race started on time. Race favourite Rhodes End at 2-1 made poor going on the heavy track, failing to live up to punters' expectations. By the last turn, it was anybody's race.
In the Perrier Grand Prix as they swing around the turn, and the leader now was Crossroads, swept up and went to the leader. I'm an individual coming after it. Hader Prince and Rhodes End, a Noble Player running home well down the outside. Plenty of hopes with about 300 to go, where the leader now is I'm an individual. Noble Player coming home well. In third place over on the inside, Kiwi Kong and Rhodes End giving them a fair start, but on the outside...
As the pack neared the line, owner of Noble Player, Peter Piney, could see a win for his horse drawing near. Noble Player at 10-1, ridden by Stuart Plain, took the line by a nose from number 9, I'm an Individual.
It was on for young and old this morning as free breakfasts were served to any cyclist who rolled up at District Park near the International Sports Centre. The Ride to Work or School Day is organised by the Newcastle Cycleways movement, designed to get more people on bikes. Movement President Colin Kay says Australia could save up to $30 million a year in oil costs if the number of cyclists was doubled. At present, only 4% of the population regularly ride bikes. The keen bike riders were easy to spot this morning. Many wore safety helmets and cycling shorts. The cycling movement claims cycling is one of the most healthy forms of exercise. Professor Kay says cycling is easier on the joints than jogging and is an ideal way to tone muscles. Bicycle Week activities continue at the Newcastle Velodrome tonight, where track races for all grades will be contested by cyclists from as far away as Taree.
Next year's production of premium wines was already in trouble after severe frosts hit the Coonawarra and Padthaway regions in South Australia. Extensive damage was caused, with some growers reporting crop losses ranging from 20 to 80%. A hailstorm in the Barossa Valley also destroyed top-quality grapes worth around $1,000 a tonne. The bad weather was not confined to the southern state. Last Monday, a freak hailstorm struck Tyrrell's winery at Pecolbin, flattening their high hopes for the 88 vintage.
Well, I think here on our own property we've probably lost about 100 tonnes, and amongst 2 or 3 of our grape growers probably another 100 tonnes. So that 200 is going to be equivalent to about 15,000 cases of wine, and really in the area of top premium wine.
But you're not alone in this, are you?
Oh no, it's been fairly well spread throughout the valley, but of course last week in South Australia the Barossa and Eden Valley were hit by hail, and Coonawarra, Keppoch and Padthaway, which are very big producing areas, have been burnt by frost.
What effect is this going to have on the 88 vintage?
Well, it means that there's going to be a lot less basically red wine around. White's a bit easier because you can run vintage to vintage, but 87 vintage just gone was light on red in the southern areas of Australia, and now here and them being hit again, red wine's going to get scarce.
Country roads have a relatively high accident record, but Stay Safe Committee member John Price, the member for Waratah, says it's simplistic to blame road conditions themselves for accidents. In its study, the Stay Safe Committee considered present speed warning signs on corners inadequate. The committee wants to see more comprehensive signs which would indicate the degree of difficulty of a corner and differentiate between various vehicle types. It also sees merit in the signs providing warnings for different weather conditions. As far as speed limits go, the committee found the limits and the police enforcement of them have low credibility in the minds of most drivers. Mr Price makes the point that in some instances 60, 80 or even 100 km/h limits might be inappropriate, but it might be necessary to have other limits, such as a 40 km/h limit on a stretch of winding mountain road. Other recommendations were that more attention be given to removing roadside poles and large trees, and that seatbelts be obligatory for everyone, and that RBT be intensified in country areas.
It's the first time the International Police Association has held its convention in Newcastle. Those attending have come from all over Australia and spent today registering for weekend activities. During registration, retired and current law enforcement officers were given identification badges and information about Newcastle. The association was officially formed in Britain in 1950, while the Australian section got underway in 1964.
The International Police Association is a worldwide organisation to foster friendship between members or ex-members of the police force, to assist them in any way they possibly can in relation to travel, accommodations if they go overseas, is generally a friendship organisation.
The association spans throughout the world with 235,000 members. In Australia it has 2,500 members. Considering there are around 37,000 Australian police, membership could be higher.
The main reason for the lack of membership, I think, is because a lot of the members don't realise the advantages of being a member.
Peter Speers is a lecturer in urban history at Macquarie University. He's a believer in open-air conservation, that is, the concept of keeping historical buildings through their adaptation for other uses. He says the East End archaeological site lends itself well to this form of development.
But I would like to think that the archaeological remains could be available for the public to look at. The main problem there is you've got to be careful about vandalism and so on. But I think I was down there this morning and a group of school kids were clambering over the site and they found it really interesting. It's an educational resource.
Mr. Speers believes Newcastle has natural qualities that make up a beautiful inner city, but he says it's already been marred by unsympathetic building.
And it's really starting from sort of the riverside and the ocean side, and it builds up into two peaks with the cathedral and the hospital. And it means that you get a better sweep than you normally do in other Australian cities. And I'm very worried, therefore, about high-rise development on the foreshores. I think those two motels that are built above the beach are an awful example of sort of mid-60s development. They're ugly buildings in themselves and they really do spoil the landscape of that part of Newcastle, and I'd hate to see the same thing happen on the Hunter River side.
But of course there's always the argument that the city needs development like that.
Yes, I think Newcastle certainly does need development, but the point is that it's got a lot of existing buildings with great potential, quite notable buildings that can be refurbished and used for office blocks, residences, coffee lounges and so on. Some of that's already happening.
Mr. Speers also had harsh words for the Queen's Wharf Tower, steadily taking shape on the harbour foreshore.
It bears no relation to the general layout of the city, and I just don't think it works, and it's a great pity. It's the equivalent of Sydney's monorail, and it should come down.
Ainsworth Distributors, which trades as aristocratic poker machines, is undergoing a reorganisation and wants to reduce its workforce. 2 employees have been transferred and another 5 sacked. However, a major problem arose over the issue of seniority, with employees saying that 2 of the workers should not have been sacked because of their length of service. Today, the Metal Workers Union stepped in and met with management while the poker machine repairers stayed off the job waiting for a reply. The union said if the issue was not resolved, poker machines would not be fixed as they broke down. However, after emerging from the meeting, Metal Workers Union spokesman Dennis Nichols said the issue had been resolved.
The company have now agreed to reinstate those people, so the seniority question is resolved.
Does that mean that some other people are being retrenched instead of the ones that have been here for longer?
Unfortunately it does. The employees who are least senior in the company, there are only 2 of those that will be retrenched, but they will be given the first opportunity of re-employment, and we're hoping that that'll be shortly after Christmas.